All right, hey everybody. I'm Mark Leombruni. I'm the head of news audio for Vice Media. And this is a presentation on the making of Vice News Tonight and doing all of our audio post-production in it. A little bit about me, for those you don't know. I've been doing audio professionally for the past 10 years. I spent a few years at NPR, worked at ESPN, did work for Audible, commercial agencies around New York City. I've been at Vice for the past 3 years. And about 2 years ago is when we launched Vice News Tonight. And one of the main challenges of this show is that there is a new 30-minute documentary show every single night. So the simple answer to this question, what would you do, is to make a workflow that completely finishes entirely in Premiere Pro. All right, so for those of you who don't know too much about the show, I'm going to play a little bit of as a sizzle so you can get the idea of the format and the style of stuff we produce.
Obviously, they're sending out a lot of airstrikes.
We didn't... Stop, please.
Bizarre experience.
In that 1 gram, that's actually 50,000 fatal overdoses.
That's a city.
It was scary. Honestly, I didn't expect our house to be standing.
This was my son's room. 4 people died within a quarter of a mile of here.
Where are their snipers?
We're taking fire.
The alt-right is very organized. They have a lot of numbers, they have shields.
We're not non-violent. We'll fucking kill these people if we have to. Everybody in! Fight jumped in the fucking van.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
There are bodies laying on the ground right now.
I think that a lot more people are going to die before we're done here, frankly.
Okay, so these guys are going into the tunnel now. They haven't actually cleared this area yet.
As far as we're aware, we're the first foreign journalists that have been taken here.
Yeah, there are footprints everywhere. There are people that have been walking around here.
We don't kill cosas. Policemen, professionals.
Yung boss po namin, pulis po siya.
Down on the mall, things were quiet, they were orderly, they were peaceful. If you were down on the mall for Donald Trump's inaugural, you had no idea this scene was happening just a handful of blocks away.
All right, so now that you saw the show, inside Premiere Pro, we've been able to have massive gains in our ability to do post-finishing. That sizzle you saw, and with everything that goes out for the show, it's all mixed, colored, all post is done just entirely in Premiere. So we've seen about an 80% reduction in turnaround time for post-mix. And that kind of comes from the idea is that for a typical 30-minute show, most places set aside about an hour per minute. So you're going to say maybe a 5-day turnaround for mix for a half-hour episode of TV. For our show, we do it in about 2 hours consistently every single day. With that, we have faster export times because we're able to standardize all the project. We use a single Premiere project and template it out to deliver to all our different formats. And one of my favorite things is we don't have to use AAFs or OMFs There's no transferring between projects. There's no exporting. So at any point, the editors or the producers can change what's happening, which is really important in daily news in case something happens that we need to change the context of what we're saying or bring in a new story. So really, Premiere Pro is the only way to do it for finishing. All right, so a little bit more about Vice for those who don't know. We are a global country. Our headquarters is based out of Brooklyn, New York, and we have 36 different territories we're operating in currently. So let's take a little bit more about a look at the show, Vice News Tonight. We've been on the air for 2 years, and as of tonight, we have aired 414 half-hour primetime episodes, 10 of which were specials. Weekly, we have 250 million viewers worldwide through BBC World News. We won some Emmys last year. We've been nominated for a bunch and a whole lot of other awards. So everyone's pretty part of the work that we've been doing here. So we'll dig a little bit more into the format of the show. It airs every night at 7:30 on HBO Eastern Time, so you can watch that live or on HBO Go. The airing is about 22 to 28 minutes, and it's 4 to 5 nights a week, depending on the year and the season. The show is built together in different packages and stories, and it's assembled and executed live out through VizRT. There's two main types of packages. One is a day of air package, so it's a short shoot that might be like from shooting it to ingesting it to editing it to mixing it to air. We do it all in about 60 minutes. From there, we also have longer form packages, which might be a multi-day edit. So that's something like, let's do a story on the water crisis in South Africa. It's been ongoing. The government's trying to regulate the water flow there. So we'll work on it for a few days, then determine the best time to release it. So as you might have seen before, I said mix a show in 8 hours. So pretty much the #1 requirement that the producers and EPs asked of me is to be able to do it in a timely fashion. We need to make editorial changes throughout the entire day, all the way up to air, again, because this is news. With that, it has to have really good quality. I mean, we're going to air on HBO, so it has to sound as good as anything else that's out there, Last Week Tonight, Game of Thrones, etc. And like I mentioned in the last slide, we do build it in packages. So with that, every package, segment to segment, has to sound the same, depending what editor works on it. So when it's all assembled and played out, it feels as if it's one consistent show, stylistically in terms of quality as well. The other main constraint is compatibility. We have about 75 post-production operators. That's between editors, AEs, graphic artists, mixers. And everyone needs to be able to work off this project dynamically, pass it back and forth between the different teams depending on what their responsibility is. So to just have it all work natively inside Premiere is really our only option. So now if we take a look at these constraints and how they add up together, that also informed the way I engineered the workflow here. So for it to be high quality and the ability to change it, we have to tweak the mix and make changes in the final review, which again highlights up to air, but that's important for quality. For quality and compatibility, we ended up only using stock plugins inside Premiere Pro for all the mixing. And again, with that, it's running on so many different machines, we didn't want to bother using different software. The Adobe Suite has everything we pretty much need for it, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then there's a constraint of time and compatibility. So throughout the day, we might finish a story or finish maybe an act of a story, and we'll pass it off to mix and color. We'll do the process there and finish it in post and send it back to edit. So then the segment producers can go through and review it, and they can see the finished product in the edit room before it actually goes out to final review. This way we can kind of systematize an order of approvals. And yep, again, Premiere is the one thing that brings it all together. All right, so let's take a look at more on the average turnaround times for these sort of packages. So again, we have our desk report, which is about 2 to 5 minute piece. It might be a correspondent in a field or sitting down and interviewing someone, 2 people talking. We estimate about 10 to 15 minutes turnaround from when that's delivered to us to when it's ready to go to air. So sometimes it comes as late as 20 of 6 and then 7, and then we need it back by 5 of. For the longer packages, that might be 5 to 10 minutes, we still need to turn around in pretty quick time because we're constantly working on pieces and reviewing them throughout the day. This schedule has to be still just as tight. The advantage of this is we get multiple times to maybe process it over a week or over a 2-day edit. So not only is it important to, like I said, all the challenges beforehand of delivering it and getting it to air, I also have to work into design who we're delivering to. So we have a single Premiere project that mainly goes and is designed to deliver to HBO and live broadcast. From there, all those assets needs to be prepped in a way to deliver to all our international partners. On top of that, we also deliver to all our social media platforms. And we have to consider a way that we'll be able to store it for vault storage, long-time archival, because we can't keep all the original raw media with just the sheer volume of what we're doing. And that had to work into the design as well. Now, let's get a little bit more into the life of a single package, how our team is designed. So first, something is shot, it comes in on card via live view or satellite, it's ingested into our servers, and then the ingest team QCs the media to make sure that the quality is there, we're getting what we're told we're getting from the field. At that point, they send it to the AEs. The AEs take the media, they sync it, put it all together, and make sync maps of each day. So it'll be interview, walking up to the courthouse, different segments like that. At that point, they organize and pick the best audio tracks. From there, they hand off the organized projects to the editors, and this kind of becomes a central hub for the next part of our production process. The editors is constantly getting VO that we record and send to them as well. There's always an intro segment that kind of lets people know what the package is going to be about. So our show is pretty VO heavy. We do about 5 hours of VO recording a day for it. On top of that, the editors and producers work with our graphics team using After Effects and different graphics panels inside Premiere to supply all the graphics for the show. Now, once a piece is done being edited, or there's a moment that the editor can take a break for review, I use a system which is called like red light, green light. So if the editor is working on something, the mix isn't, and the color isn't. But if mixing color is working on something, the editor takes a break. And this is again how we systemize the order of work. So once it does go to color and mix, I duplicate the Premiere project, and the mix team will work on it, and it only will affect just the audio clips. From there, the color team will go and do their color grading, and they will only do the color processing inside Premiere on all the video clips. From there, the two of the packages are merged together. So in the audio sequence, I delete all the video, and then I import the color sequence, copy all the video, and paste it on top of it. So what goes back to the editor is a finished color and mix that is completely inside Premiere with all the original media being linked. So this is no exports, this is no other media being sourced. So then from there, once the package is done, we send it to a process called stacking, where we assemble all of them together, and look how the editorial kind of fits together in terms of the story for the day. Again, it gets exported and played out to VizRT to broadcast. And so yeah, that's kind of the story of the package. So let's dig a little bit deeper into each of those steps and how they handle audio. And again, it's not just about the engineering that I've developed inside the templates, it's also about the organization and the division of labor between the team as the project is passed between them. So again, the first thing that the ingest team does is they come in and QC the media. I made a point to make a template where people will bring in all the media and see it in the format we're going to be working in. So they can look at the waveform, they can solo each track and make sure that the quality is right. Let us know if there's anything we need to look out for down the line. From there, we go to the AEs. So the AEs will take all the media and make these sync maps. And what I really want in the process is just to have the 2 or 3 pertinent audio sources that's needed for each scene. And as you can see here, there's a lot of different sources. I'm sure this is something everyone's kind of familiar with an edit, especially if a multi-camera shoot. Our goal of this process is, as the AEs organize it, they also select the best source. So the number one question or statement that I get from AEs or editors when I bring up this idea is, I can't tell what the best source is, so I definitely don't want to choose. And I thought you shouldn't delete tracks, you need to say everything for mix. Well, thanks to some of the advantages inside Premiere, we found out ways to make that job a lot easier. So let's take a first look at the idea of you can't tell what the right source is. So in that last sequence I showed you, it was a long interview. And I know there's a lot to read right here, but basically it was a 3-camera shoot with external audio. So using Essential Sound, I encourage the AEs to zoom into a simple segment of maybe the 2 people being interviewed who talk. They automatically gain all the clips to be the same volume. And then from there, it's really easy to solo through them and be able to tell, oh, that's the lav, it has the best source, or that's the boom, et cetera, et cetera. The other comment is, well, what if it gets deleted and it's the wrong one? Well, a lot of people don't know this, but because we're referencing the original source media, you can right-click on it and you can change the clip tracks. Oh, that's just me saying I should clean it. So here's the example of that, right. So here's your source media over here, and you can see it's on channel 2. At any point, you can open up a panel and assign it to channel 4 or channel 5. So if by the time it gets to the mix stage, if I decide, actually, the lav has a little bit of interference at that one moment we really need, from here I can just dynamically switch it to the boom without having to go back and re-edit it in. And this is great because, again, if you were working with an AAF or OMF, you'd have to go back to your producer, your AE, get him to find the other track. You'd have to get him to re-export it. You'd have to get him to set it to you. You'd have to cut it back in. I mean, what I'm just describing is an hour-long process. With here, it just literally takes seconds to do. So, yep, that's the advantage of doing that. Now, as we pass the process on to the editors, their goal is to organize and automatically kind of pre-mix the arrangement. This is a screen grab of an edit that went out on Thursday night. It's a series called She's Running, following a congressional candidate in California. And as you can see here, it's about a 10.5-minute mix so far. This ended up being a 22-minute piece. And what I love about this is that in every single scene, you can see there's only 1 or 2 audio clips active. There's some moments where it's checkerboarding, but by the time this comes to mix, all the decisions have been made for the right channels and a good balance of gain, so we can focus on doing EQ and processing and all the other elements that we want to focus on and mix other than organization. So we're going to get a little bit deeper into this tool here. One of the great advantages to a lot of editors is the Essential Sound panel. And you might see something like this. It's like a 6-person round table with all different sources and different volumes. And with Essential Sound, I'm able to select all of them and set it to dialogue setting, and all the clips are automatically gained to be the same level. Now, me and Duran, some other team members at Adobe, showed me how to go through and edit the panel that best suits our needs for this. But you can define what type of effects and settings you want to come automatically. For basic settings for dialogue, basic settings for ambience, basic settings for music. So again, doing this manually would require gaining each clip up and down, looking at a meter, cross-referencing it, and in just a matter of 3 seconds, I can do what normally takes about 10 or 15 minutes. So the goal of putting this together is, once they're all gained to the same clip, you can easily checkerboard and choose the right source. So this way, you're kind of toggling between who's talking in that interview. Okay. From here, I've also established a standard order in which editors should gain things. The idea of this is everyone works in the same method, has the same sort of vernacular, we're all coming from the same spot, and there's no guessing. So the first thing to do is gain things in Essential Sound. From there, you can use your clip gain and boost it up and down. Thirdly, you can do your volume lines and keyframe automation. And then lastly, from there, we tell editors to highlight clips mango as a way to say, hey, take a deeper look into this when it hits the mix stage. So to summarize, by the time the package is out of edit, all the audio clips are organized on their appropriate tracks. The best audio sources are easily chosen for each scene, and audio clips are instantly gained to broadcast volume. So as we pass it over to the mix stage, I'll talk a little bit more about what happens here. Now, as I mentioned, I have a discrete number of tracks, and why that's important is if 2 or 3 editors are working on the same piece, they can make vertical cuts up and down, copy everything and paste it inside another sequence. And I know that the organization and the arrangement of the tracks will be the same between all of them. So all of our 30-some-odd editors use the exact same sequence order. On top of that, each of the tracks has group audio processing on it, which speeds up the audio mixing process. So we do clip effects in EQ, which I'll get into in a moment, but let me dig a little bit deeper into what's happening with track-based and group-based processing. So over here is you have the audio track mixer. It's kind of like sequence settings for audio. As you notice over here, the track names in your sequence match the track names up here. Inside the audio track mixer. If you click over here in the upper left, you can have a bunch of effects on the tracks. But what I use this panel for is to assign these tracks to groups. So anything that is assigned to the VO group will all be summed together and get group processing. Same thing for dialogue. It's the same thing for Nats, and the same thing for music. So as I slide over here to the right, you're going to see these are our subgroup master tracks. And these are great because I have a bunch of processing and different outputs for each of them. So I'm going to go over here to our next slide to take a closer look at this. So our stems for mixing are split into 5 different groups: VO, dialogue, Nats, music, and sound effects. And what's great about the output assignments here is, as you'll notice, all of them are going out 1 and 2. So your audio channels out of your Premiere project 1 and 2 is the stereo mix. From there, you also have our stems. So VO is just going out 3 and 4, dialogue is just going out 5 and 6, et cetera, et cetera. So I have isolated channels of each of them, which is great for archival and remixing. The other great thing is they all add up to be the stereo mix afterwards. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look as to what's going into each of the processing on the channels. Oh, here. Right. So the first thing I have is a de-esser, which is a good way to kind of reduce the S's and the sibilants of processing. This is an example of the chain that I have on our VO bus. From there, I put a parametric equalizer, and this is just like a simple sort of catch-all EQ that will treat the typical sounds that I want to be treated in VO. Again, I'm going through and affecting each clip individually, but this is like a baseline that all audio gets processing that goes through the VO bus. From there, I just use a very simple single band compressor to kind of smooth out the highs and the lows, and then I finish it with a limiter. Now, each of these plugins were chosen for the speed of export, for the smoothness of playback, and the compatibility between all the machines. So again, they're very simple. I don't need a lot of fancy plugins with bells and whistles emulating analog gear. I just need something practical and efficient. And these stock plugins by Adobe Premiere is all we need to get what we need for good broadcast quality sound. All right. So what else is important about all those templates, the subgroup processing, is I'm able to make different sequences with different audio settings inside them, inside the audio track mixer. And with that, I can also change the video settings inside each of the sequences and templates. So basically, if it starts out a package for TV broadcast, I can have settings that work for web release or YouTube release or going to our international partners. And all the thing that an editor and AE would need to do is just to copy everything and just paste it into another sequence and then hit export. So we've systematized the process of doing this, delivering to all the different specs. From here, we've also automated with other software built inside Premiere. We had a process that took about 4 or 5 AEs, several hours overnight to do all these exports to all different deliverables. And with this sort of templated automation process, I've reduced it to about 30 minutes. So it's a huge save in time and money to be able to kind of automate and systematize this. Okay, so enough of the theory. Here's a little bit of a practical application of mixing inside Premiere. This is just kind of a screen record of a mix that happened. It's in real time, and if you look up in the upper right hand, it's about 6:45 at the time, so our show airs at 7:30. It's a 3.5 minute piece that came in, and we need to mix it as fast as possible for air. No, I won't play the whole thing, but I was able to mix it in about 7 minutes, but I'm going to show you the first 2 minutes of the process here. So if you look at the tracks, the editor did some organization. They kind of picked the right clips, but this was a rush piece, so they kind of can give me what the best they can. And from there, you're going to see what I do. So the first step I'm going to do is organize the clips on the correct tracks. I'm going to automatically gain them using the Essential Sound panel. Then from there, I'm going to play it down. I'm going to quickly select the best sources, make an EQ profile for each of the clips, and then paste it throughout the process. So the first thing here is you can kind of tell this is all dialogue, so I'm going to put it on the dialogue track. I'm going to generate waveform for everything after this, so you can see the waveform easily. I'm going to auto-gain the dialogue. And then I'm going to auto-gain this to be ambience. You can kind of tell that it's underneath dialogue, it's probably going to be ambience. Then for the music, I'm going to remove whatever sort of volume automation there is from it. And then I'm going to automatically gain it to be music. And if you look at the waveform, you'll see it change. And again, this is in real time. It's that quick that it automatically sets it to a broadcast level. So from here, I'm going to start playing this down and picking the sources. A little ambience. It's a bit quieter.
Have you all heard here about President Trump's executive order?
So I'm going to boost this up.
That promises not to separate families.
Kind of fix that intro.
Buenos días. Hola.
Great. Now pick channels.
Have you all heard here about President Trump's executive order that promises not to
Top
separate
is his lav.
families?
Yo la desconozco. Soy la encargada de las notas periodísticas en todo lo relacionado a esta situación de migrantes.
Which is the bottom channel. At this point, I'm going to grab an EQ, drop it on clip 1.
Have you all heard here
and
about
EQ.
President Trump's executive order that promises not to separate families?
I know it's kind of hard to hear in this noisy environment, but this is what the EQ process looks like.
Promises not to separate families.
Yo la desconozco.
Once I get a good profile for him, I'm going to paste it on all the clips that I assume will be his. And I can change them dynamically if I have to go. So that gets pasted on here. I'm going to paste it on her, and then I'm going to tweak it to fit her voice better.
Sí, y
so I don't have to start from scratch.
Esta nueva nota, ¿no? del señor Trump. Entonces, pues, todo, como ustedes verán,
great. And then I'm going to take that EQ
and
paste it across all of her clips.
Separación de familias, ahí está plasmado, ahí lo ven nuestros hermanos migrantes. Pero
and here I'm putting simple audio transitions, so there's no clicks or pops between each of the clips.
From trying to cross the border?
No, no cambia. No cambia su iniciativa.
And so just that quickly, I'm confident I have broadcast safe gain for the whole piece. I have a good level between dialogue, between ambience and music, and I was quickly be able to create an EQ profile for each person speaking, and then I can copy and paste those elements throughout. So again, I'm about a minute into it, so close to halfway done with the piece, and I've only been mixing for 2.5 minutes. And again, the amount of turnaround time to take this outside of Premiere or use it in any other program, within 2 to 3 minutes, you would never be this far into the mix process. So I'm just going to briefly touch on a little bit more of the advanced techniques that we have here. I know it's kind of a lot to look at, but we're able to do deeper things because we're editing and mixing inside of Premiere Pro. So all the guys on my team who are great also do this sound design and composition for the show as well as mixing. So this is a segment that we call the But First, and it's a bunch of short little news clips that happen at the top of the day. And we have a piece of original music here, and it's all split out into stems. So up top, you have dialogue, a little bit of stuff from the AP feed, and then over here is some nats. And this next group is... those are all the different stems for the music. So you have your beat, you have like your hi-hat, electric parts named by the editors, and an easy way for them to identify them. So depending on what story it is in this segment, if it's upbeat, I can add more elements. If it's more sad or it needs to be down-tempo, I can pull back other elements. Now below it, down here in the bottom, this colorful grid, this is a tempo map of the rhythm of the music. So what's great about that is visually, the editors can see what a bar of music is, and then from there, they can line up their edit to a segment to be the exact 2 bars or a whole phrase of the music. So they're able to change the arrangement, have a tempo map to edit to, and then match their visuals with it at the same time. The other thing I'd just like to quickly touch on is the process isn't just about working quickly in shortcuts and being as fast as possible. We also try to do long form and real quality verite journalism. So about last year in August, we did a piece about a race riot down in Charlottesville, Virginia in the United States. And it's won a bunch of awards this year, nominated for several Emmys, and it went viral pretty quick, say 40 million views within the first 24 hours roughly. So the story of this is pretty interesting because it was a quick turnaround time, but we were still able to make a full half-hour piece of material just strictly using this process, finishing in Premiere Pro. So on Saturday, we had about 20 hours of footage. The race riot happened mainly, a lot of the violence happened on Saturday. We had 2 cameras there and a team. So we realized this could turn into a bigger story. On Sunday, we had 4 editors cutting that overnight 20 hours of footage down to about 40 minutes of total runtime. By Monday morning AM, it was split into 4 sequences that were roughly aiming to cut it down to 22 minutes. Now, by 3 p.m., we were still getting in new footage because more stuff was still developing down there. We wanted to cover what was happening as close as much to air. Around 4 p.m. that day, And that was the first time the color and mix team were able to actually start working on the segments. So beforehand, yes, using our auto gain methods and Essential Sound, the editors were working and arranging and organizing the pieces. So when they did hand it to us this late in the day, by typical production standards, we didn't feel like we were behind at all. And again, by 7:30, it was up to air. So we were going back and forth, working in segments, splitting it down into 5-minute chunks, 3-minute chunks, working on it, passing it back to the editors, and they were trying to determine what was working and what's not. This way we can be fully collaborative between the finishing process and the editorial process. So this is an example of a longer piece. I also did another mix on HBO called World in Disarray, which is a 90-minute feature film through HBO, which was all done inside Premiere entirely. So again, it's not just for nightly news. It could be for whatever you're interested in doing in production. Whether or not you want to completely finish in Premiere, these are some great tools that you can start to organize your audio and prep it for the finishing process. So just to kind of go back to the beginning, this is a brief summary of the gains that we've seen. And it's really kind of changed the way we think about post-production and workflow. We've been able to optimize our time for editorial and writing, and it's given us the ability to make very current, compelling content for air. So thanks again for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll be around the corner. Happy to answer anything about it. Thanks.